countdown is on. MPs return to Ottawa this week for the final sitting stretch of the year, while the House of Commons remains at a standstill. We'll have more on that in a second. The Liberals, meanwhile, are expected to present the fall economic statement in the coming weeks, maybe, and the Prime Minister will be looking to reset his front bench with a cabinet shuffle in the hopes of reviving lost Liberal fortunes. So what are the big political stories to watch for in these last few weeks of 2024? The Scrum is here to answer that. Nojoud Al Mallees is a reporter with the Canadian Press. Joel-Denis Bellavance is the Ottawa bureau chief for La Presse. And Stephanie Levitz is a senior political reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
It's good to see you. So we return after the election of Donald Trump. Is it safe to say, JD, that the Prime Minister comes back to Parliament without the knives out to the same degree as he left with that so-called coup?
I think so. I think it will bring a little bit more discipline in the Liberal ranks because they know that they face a bigger threat in Washington with the return to power of Donald Trump and the many policies that will affect Canadian interests. And I think they need to show that they're focusing on that threat rather than on their own political survival, and that Canadians would expect no less than that. And that's so it's a sort of a reprisal for Mr. Trudeau to be able to, look south and not inward in his own party. So
Steph, what do you expect that looks like? Because if it means, here's my agenda for Canadians, here's what we have had none of that this entire sitting so far. It has been consumed in the first part by questions around his leadership, and then also this paralysis in the House of Commons because there's this matter of privilege that the Conservatives won't drop, the Liberals don't have the support from other parties to push closure on. It's just this weird stagnation that has prevented them from putting forward anything meaningful. Does that change going forward?
That's the risk for Mr. Trudeau, right? I mean, if he can't find a way to motivate his own caucus and the dissidents in particular, give them something to do, keep them busy, get them out there talking about an agenda. Don't make this just about Chrystia Freeland and Melanie Joly and Dominic LeBlanc and your big heavy hitters on the front bench taking this message to Canadians. I'm not sure he can move past this frustration with him in caucus. Let's recall that, a really dangerous week for caucus always is when you go back into your constituency. Yeah, good point, yeah. Because you've spent a week listening to people give you an earful about how they feel things are going in Ottawa. So I'm not really sure that, a week at home has quelled the dissent, but it certainly perhaps has motivated MPs to come back and try and make a difference if they still can. When they're stymied in the House of Commons, though, when nothing can get done on the floor, where does that difference get made? That's going to be up to Mr. Trudeau and his team to figure out.
Is it through, Nojoud, two things that we've got our eyes on, the first being the potential cabinet shuffle? 4 ministers have already announced they're leaving, so we know that one is going to happen, but the timing of that, has seemed over the past few days to keep being pushed further out. And the same thing goes for the fall economic statement, which could be their big agenda-making item, but because of that paralysis and other questions about even who will be Minister of Finance, that seems to be like a big question mark right now too. What is your impression of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty around the fall economic statement. Again, because of this standstill in Parliament, how do you present it? Minister Freeland's not going to be able to do her typical speech if she can only table the legislation. And also, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny, I think, on what we see in the fall economic statement, particularly on the deficit number. The government promised they'd keep the deficit at $40 billion. But the PBO came out recently saying that he's projecting that it's going to be about $47 billion, which would suggest the government did not keep its promise. I'm looking forward to seeing whether that's going to matter if the government does exceed the $40 billion. Will it matter anymore that now that inflation is back down, the government could point to the Ontario government sending out $200 checks. They're being irresponsible. We're still being responsible. And so how that all plays out is going to be quite interesting. And I think right now, because of the U.S. election, it's just diverted so much attention to south of the border. And I think the question will be here, how does the Trump presidency or the expectation of the presidency play out? The Liberals are betting on presenting themselves as the ones who could steady the ship, but they'll have to prove that, I guess, in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I wonder, from where you sit, JD, is it a net negative or net positive for the government that everything is so focused on Donald Trump? Do they still need to cut through just a story about how they're handling it and deliver something more tangible in the form of what they're going to be about?
Yes, they need to reset the agenda in their favor, and that is probably with an economic update that maybe contains new spending measures. But clearly, the impact of Mr. Trump's return to the White House will affect whatever budget numbers we have, because there will be increasing pressure on the government to increase spending in military, maybe secure the border, hire new people to make sure that the border is safe, and the military will be gobbling up a lot of money from the government. And as Nojoud said, the deficit is also worrisome for some people, and you can expect the Conservative Party to make hay of any announcement that is being made by the government. So how do you reset the agenda with so much chaos in Washington and a government that has shown extreme fatigue in the eyes of the electorate? That's a difficult task to do.
Where do the opposition parties fit into this stuff? Let's start with the Conservatives, who continue to, sustain a conservative lead over the Liberals and have now for almost a year in the double digits. Do they have to be sort of, careful about where they go when it comes to Trump, or do they keep focusing on cost of living issues? Like, what's your anticipation there?
Part of it, if there is a lesson to be drawn, let's say, for the opposition parties from the U.S. election, is that, again, President-elect Trump's victory came because he was talking about the things that most people were really feeling keenly, which is the economy. So all the high-level stuff, all of the debates around democracy and what is the future of, adhering to the U.S. Constitution and all of these things, they were not ballot box questions for Canadians. Under the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre has been very focused on what he believes is the ballot box questions. If he stays focused on that, presumably Canadians stay focused with him. For the Liberals, of course, their effort will be to undercut that, right? And to try and make people say, no, he's not really focused on that. A lot of eyes, though, remain on the New Democrats and, what it's going to take for them to continue to prop up the government. And how they respond to the U.S. election, I'm not sure it matters, that much. It's just more a question of, when are you going to say, okay, Justin Trudeau, that's it, we're done supporting you, let's go to an election.
And the interesting thing is, on that point, so far it's been nothing that can bring them there. And Nojoud, I'll give the last word to you. The one thing that Jagmeet Singh has signaled could be, I guess if I'm being generous, a red line, is issues around labor. And boy, oh boy, does he have a very recent example in the strike at the ports and the lockout at the ports, and the move that the government made to force that into binding arbitration and sort of order everyone back to work. Like, if not that, what?
Yeah, it's a bit complicated on those issues, though, because I think Canadians are also very frustrated with things just not working, especially from the pandemic, just slowdowns in government processing, consequences for the economy. And so I think a lot of Canadians would be very concerned if, for example, the rails were shut or other elements of key to the economy, ports, et cetera, were down. I don't know if Canadians would tolerate that. So I understand that that's what the New Democrats have focused on. But I think what you see from the Trump election is that people are just frustrated and they're fed up and they want things to work in the economy for them. I think what's going to be very interesting is to see how what lessons the Liberals learn, I guess, from the Trump election. What issues do they focus on? Do they continue talking about abortion? Do they pivot? And also whether the Conservatives keep doing what they're doing, or do they feel like they can get an extra boost from maybe jumping on the same waves that put Donald Trump in the White House. I think that's going to be what the story to watch, not just in the next few weeks, but into next year as well.
Oh yeah, I cannot consume enough people talking about that stuff right now. It's so interesting. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the discussion, as always. JD Bellavance, Steph Levitz, and Nojoud Al Mallees. When we come back, the three things I'm watching for this upcoming week. Stay right there. More question period just ahead.